So I'm just going to say a few words to set this particular session in context. Bishop Ray has issued a pastoral letter in the last month. His clear focus is on the mission of the diocese. How do we offer the good news of the gospel as a gift to the lives of the people of the diocese? He recognizes that that is in a very much changing context. There's been a massive shift in the culture in Ireland, and that has had huge implications for church, and it also has had huge implications for the numbers of priests and religious in the church. And at our last webinar, Jessie Rogers posed the question of mission in I thought in a very beautiful way. She asked, how do we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? And I'm just going to maybe put up an image for you of this strange land, the new culture in Ireland, and one of the implications. So you'll see that image there. It tries to capture how many diocesan priests have been in Ireland over the last 400 years vis-a-vis the population. And you can see along the line on top there that from certainly from the 1700s, from the 1730s on, the numbers have been high right up to our own time. But at present, we're in a precipitous drop. It's like going over a cliff face. The highest numbers of priests and religious in Ireland were in the 1960s. Now, those people are now 60 years in their ministry, so they are coming to the end. And the next few years, and Bishop Bray has adverted to that in his pastoral letter, there's going to be a massive further shift in the next few years. Now, the issue isn't whether there are priests or religious around. The issue is how the good news of the gospel is communicated. But the context that we have to bear in mind is that we are in a radical shift in the Irish church from high numbers of priests and religious that we've been used to over the last few hundred years to a very changed circumstance today. As you know, Bishop Bray has invited people to parish meetings, which will be happening in the next month, to explore the question of how best do we continue the mission of the church in our new circumstance. And what we're doing tonight is we're just looking at some examples from outside the country of how have other folk managed, how have other dioceses managed the situation. Some of them have been dealing with this situation of the changing numbers of priests and religious for longer than us. So we have three speakers. We have Elena Mizrachi from Austria. She's a pastoral worker. We have Pauline Colt from Liverpool. She's been a volunteer in her church for decades. And we have Jerry O'Hanlon, who's an Irish Jesuit who's been involved in the synodal process in Ireland. He was on the steering group, and he'll set the stories in a synodal context. Now, one of the things Jerry was saying to me as we were preparing for this meeting was that from his read of it, there isn't a clear pathway in terms of how we manage mission in changing circumstances. There isn't a clear pathway identified by the Vatican. There's nobody anywhere in the world that says, here's the answer, folks. So the challenge for all of us is to make the pathway by walking it. And what we're hearing tonight, we're hearing two stories from Austria and from Liverpool, from folk who have been walking the path. And I'd ask you to listen gently to those stories, just to notice, okay, what strikes you? What might we learn from these stories? So that's the scene. We'll hear in turn from Elena, from Pauline, and then from Jerry, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments. So, Alina, we're going to start with you. So you've read Bishop Bray's pastoral, and I think it's not unfamiliar to you. So do you want to just tell us a small bit about yourself, what your role is, and how that kind of represents a change from the way parishes used to be in your diocese?
Thank you, Martin. Good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm very happy to share experiences with everyone. Reading the pastoral letter, I realized, yeah, we have a lot in common actually, which is always interesting to see how other dioceses deal with this situation. So, as Martin said, we've been walking this path for a while now, and I'm happy to share just some of the ideas that we have in our diocese and what we do over the last years. So we have the problem that we don't have residential priests for every parish anymore, which is, of course, a very big difference to just a couple of years ago, because people, we are very rural diocese. We have a lot of villages, smaller villages, so people are really used to having a residential priest. And in around 2004, so 20 years ago already, we started putting parishes together as some sort of parish units. So they are still their own parish, but they belong to a bigger like community together.
What we call
So
pastoral units, Alina, would that be?
yeah, that would be pretty accurate. So the biggest one that we currently have is consistent of 8 parishes, and some of these pastoral units also don't have a residential priest at all anymore, and that's why we have quite a lot of lay pastoral workers who are in these parishes, often in 2, 3 parishes, and they are like the main connection piece between priests that are coming to help out for masses, funerals, whatever, or just for also organizational things. A big problem that we are focused with, that we're faced with, is funerals, of course, because that's quite the difficulty that we had. So our diocese started a few years ago to do a course for lay pastoral workers, where they get like different insights and just different inputs, and study for a year, and then they get sent by the bishop to do funerals as well. Of course, not masses, just liturgy of the word, but this is how we do for now. I did the course myself, and it's a very rewarding task to do funerals. But we, of course, are aware that it's every Catholic's right to have a mass for their funeral. So we just have these masses like sometimes weeks after the actual funeral, and we invite the families, for example, to join the mass. But it doesn't happen for like the actual date on which the funeral is happening. It's then for like a mass for more people together. So yeah, it is working surprisingly well, even in rural parishes.
And how are
Um,
people, Elena, how are people reacting to the likes of you having that kind of key role? You're the kind of the mid person between the people on the ground and the priests that now come in occasionally. How have they reacted to you?
exactly.
Hmm.
I was actually surprised that it is quite working quite well. People are quite open to it, and especially also people who are a bit older and already very used to having a residential priest. They are also very open to walking this new path, and just I think they are also very happy that there is someone in their actual parish that is a connection to the priest, and that can guide them a bit and help them a bit out when they have questions, and that there is just someone, a familiar face, if you want, that they can turn to. Yeah, something that we also have in our pastoral units is that we have like some sort of parish councils. They get elected every 4 years. It's voluntary workers. And then this council also tries to do different decisions, also when it comes to finances. Usually it's guided by a priest. And that works quite well because it's many shoulders to spread the work on. Yeah, that's
Okay, Elena. So the picture you're painting there is that the diocese has held on to parish identity. There aren't resident parish priests. There are people like yourself, paid pastoral workers who coordinate folk on the ground, and then the priest will come in occasionally around key moments. Is that a fair summary of?
Yeah, not in every pastoral area. We thankfully still have a lot of pastoral areas with residential priests. It's now just in the next years, we have also a bit of a retirement wave coming up. So it will be more and more difficult. But for now, thankfully, most pastoral areas still have a residential priest. But of course, with 8 parishes or maybe in the future even more, it's difficult to be present everywhere on every Sunday for every mass. So therefore, there are now quite a lot of pastoral workers being the connecting factor.
And how, Elena, how did you end up in that job?
Well, I did study theology, and actually I wanted to go for teaching, and then I just came across the possibility to become a lay pastoral worker, because it's a job profile that's never really occurred to me, but it sounded interesting. So I did an additional year of training after my studies, and yeah, now it's my 5th year already, and I really enjoy it. It's really nice working with the people.
Yes, yes. And you're a married woman. You're starting a family, and
Yeah. We're actually currently awaiting our first child in March. So
oh yeah, congratulations,
yeah,
Elena.
thank you.
Yes, yes. And yeah, so it looks like you found, I mean, because you look very happy, very yeah, you just look very happy in that role.
Yeah, it is quite difficult. So you need, if you want to have like a family life, you need to have a partner that's on board with it, because of course it's a lot of evening meetings. A lot of our voluntary workers only have time for meetings in the evening, as I guess it is the same in Ireland. And also it's a lot of weekends, of course. We don't have mass on every Sunday. Sometimes we just have liturgy of the word. So that means also being present on Sunday morning, of course, for work and not just attending mass as a family. So
Okay,
yeah,
so
it can
you're
be,
involved in the
yeah,
organizing of the liturgy. Yes, yes.
exactly, yeah.
Okay, okay.
But
All
it's a
right.
very rewarding job, very beautiful.
Okay, Elena. All right, Elena. We'll hold it there for the minute. I want to bring in Pauline now, and then we'll see, compare and contrast Pauline's story. So you there, Pauline? So Pauline, so your story in Witness is different. Like what Elena describes is that each parish has held on to its identity, and pastoral workers have been brought in to coordinate between the local parishes and the clergy that are available. In your situation, you actually amalgamated 7 parishes into one. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. In Widnes, I'm from Widnes in the Liverpool Archdiocese, and in Widnes we took a different path. It's not a typical path in the Liverpool Archdiocese by any means. So we were 9 parishes in the town of Widnes. Widnes is a smallish town, about 64,000 people, and quite a heavy Catholic presence in the town. And during the past 24, 25 years, we've travelled a path of amalgamating parishes, working parishes together in different ways, becoming pastoral area, starting new initiatives, working as a whole pastoral area. So when I read your pastoral letter, your recent pastoral letter, one of the things that struck me in that, Martin, was where it says the challenge ahead, that Bishop Ray had put we need to explore how each local church community can thrive with local leadership, acting co-responsibly with the priests in ministry. And I loved that word, thrive, because so often when we're looking at how can we move things forward, we use the word survive. And I think the word thrive Oh, made me think lovely, because it's a time of it's very much a sense of a people of hope and working together. That's what struck me from your pastoral letter. I felt there was a lot of positivity, where the bishop outlined what you could do. What do we think of our parishes as? And when we've journeyed in witness, we've gone through so many groupings of how we work together. And all through that, it was all about building connections and relationships, not just within our singular parishes, because for me, my original parish, I could walk 10 minutes up the road and I'm in the next parish.
Yeah.
I could walk 15 minutes in the opposite direction and have been in another parish. And they all worked as singular parishes some 24 years ago. But through this consultation process, I'll just give you an insight into where we are now. And now, in witness, we've become one new parish. We're 9 years into this new parish now.
Yep.
We've amalgamated all of the parishes and took the decision to become one new parish. But a lot of groundwork and connecting work went on to enable that to be the natural process, to decide to come together in strength as one. And the mindset was, why don't we come together as one? Because we are about the same thing.
Yeah.
And this sense of mission in your pastoral letter stood out, because it is about mission, serving each other and being community and knowing each other. We've not got a pastoral associate, a paid pastoral worker, but we've got a lot of very committed laity who are not employed laity, but we have a collective understanding of what our role is and our vocation, because everybody, we have some paid administrators and roles like that, but there's a very strong sense of how lay people work together. And really, I sort of think it's not about being a volunteer, it's about fulfilling your baptismal calling. And that's a strong sort of thread, really, that binds us together and connects us. And it's fascinating how over these past 9 years now as one new parish, we kept 4 churches and we use those churches as one parish. So the team of priests who serve us, they work as a team. Currently, we've got 4 priests. When we first became St. Wilfrid's, we had 5, but they go across the whole parish. They live in different houses, but they work as a team. So when I go to Mass on Sunday morning, it could be any one of the 4 at that.
So the picture there you're describing, Pauline, is what was once 7 parishes is now a single parish unit with a parish team and a parish priest. So instead of, say, a few priests trying to cover multiple parishes, they have one parish. But that, as I understand it, on the ground, around each of the churches, there are teams of lay people who work on such matters as the liturgies and other.
Yes, yeah, and we don't necessarily restrict ourselves to working in one church, because the churches are merely the buildings that serve us as gathering places. So I might be on a rota in any one of the 4 churches, for example. I will go to a certain mass of a weekend because that's my mass of choice. But during the week and at different meetings or other services or social gatherings, it can be anywhere in the parish. So we use it collectively, and the priests travel around to all 4 churches.
And how have people reacted to that change, Pauline, would you say?
Well, because we put some things in place and we worked on doing certain things. For example, one thing that we did before we'd become St Wilfrid's, we decided to have a pastoral area, which I think you work in pastoral areas, don't you, as groups of parishes. As a pastoral area, we made the decision to have one Easter vigil. So we didn't have all separate little Easter vigils that year. We all came together and had one very big Easter vigil in our biggest church. So those steps are all steps about coming together as a pastoral area, as well as being in different parishes at the time. And people slowly adapted to it. At first, I would say, there was a sense of, if I ever say the term, defending what is ours. You know, that was sort of at play for people for quite a while. And one of the things we had was a pastoral area prayer that we used in all of our meetings, wherever the meetings took place. And one of the things that stuck with me, this is from like 14 years ago now, help us to move from defending what is ours to sharing with others the gifts you give us. And there was a sense of, you know, we're not against each other. And once you start thinking like that, we are all about ensuring our church, as your Archbishop said, your Bishop said, thrives into the future. So if we're infighting or thinking, oh, you know, we want this church, we're not that, we try to avoid having a sense of winners and losers, because of course we did close half of our church buildings when we became St Wilfrid's.
Yes. Okay, now Pauline, I'm going to move on to Jerry, but maybe just before we move on, I'd just be interested, like, what's it been like for you? Like, it's been a long journey, and it sounds like you still have lots of energy. Like,
yes,
has the journey been life-giving for you?
It has been life-giving. I mean, I won't pretend, Martin, it's been undulating, the journey. If one of the terms that I sort of use is, you see the changing contours of the landscape. And sometimes you feel as though you're going uphill, and other times you're freewheeling, going downhill and having a lovely time. But such is life. But you do feel, talking to other parishioners, you do feel a sense of being one community and knowing each other. So I wouldn't want to go, if I answer it like this, if you said, Pauline, you can go back to when you were in your singular parish, like pre-2000, I wouldn't want to do that.
All right. That's a good note. Okay. Yeah. All right, Pauline, thanks for that note for the minute. We'll come back to you. So Jerry, you're there. You've been listening to Pauline and Elena, and your own context. You're a theologian, and you're reflecting on the future of the church. You're reflecting on the synod. So what strikes you from what you've heard so far?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Martin. Yeah, the stories are fascinating. I mean, just to say at the start that for me, this is the best time in my life as a priest, this time of the church. So that's interesting, because when you think back on it, I'm one of those vocations you mentioned in the 60s, and there were full of priests and so on. But there's something happening now which Elena and Pauline have illustrated, which is, to me, quite wonderful. And a story illustrates it well, I think. There's a canon lawyer called Miriam Williams, and she tells the story of meeting a fellow student of hers when she was a student canon lawyer. She met this young seminarian during her studies, and afterwards he became a bishop. And she met him, and he said to her, "Can you advise me, Miriam? I'm in a diocese where there are a lot of problems and they need answers quickly. And I find the whole idea of a diocesan pastoral council wearisome. It takes time, it's long, and in canon law, it's not strictly necessary. So what do you think? And she said to him, Bishop, do you do confirmations? And he said, I do, and I like them. The idealism of young people is wonderful. And she said, and do you believe that these young people receive the gift of the Holy Spirit? And he said, yes, of course. And she said, when they're adults, do they still have the Holy Spirit? And of course he said, yes, they do. And she said, well, how are you going to hear what the Holy Spirit is saying in your diocese unless you have things like pastoral councils and other ways of meeting with the people? And I think what we're hearing from Elena and Pauline is just that input that the people of God have to decision-making and to the ordinary working of the church. So the new model that Pope Francis is promoting focuses very much on baptism as the primary sacrament. And in baptism, we have a share. We don't understand that if we're baptized as infants, but we understand it better afterwards. We have a share in the priesthood of Jesus Christ, and that's to do with holiness. Everyone is called to holiness. We have a share in the prophetic role of Jesus Christ. That's to do with teaching. And then, particularly appropriate to the present discussion and to Bishop Brown's initiative, we have a share in the kingly role of Jesus Christ. That's to do with governance. And so what the Pope has been stressing, what the Synod of Bishops stressed, was the idea of co-responsibility. And you saw the picture of the Synod in Rome. It was unprecedented to see people sitting at round tables with a facilitator like yourself to enable the conversation to proceed. The round table was the symbol, if you like, of equality, or equality as baptized people. And so you had cleric and non-cleric, bishop, priest, layperson, religious. You had male and female. And as an image, if you like, of what's going on, it was a very powerful image. So the big thing that came out of that was an endorsement of that model of church, of co-responsibility, and the invitation to the laity in particular to be involved. And I noticed Bishop Brown talks about structured engagement with the laity and structured leadership. And I think, like the other two have said, it demands great courage and openness on the part of everyone, that we speak our truth, but also that we listen very generously, that we have the patience to listen to people that perhaps we don't like and certainly we don't agree with, but there's something deeper that roots us. And so that model of conversation in the spirit, a dialogical model, a conversational model. The clergy obviously have an important role in this, but I was interested to hear Pauline say at the end she wouldn't go back to 2003. And I've heard that said by so many parishes also in Ireland who've experienced what you're going through and have galvanized themselves. And I've heard it from somebody like Bishop Ger Nash down in Ferns. He's had that experience of parishioners saying, no, we're doing very well with this model. And of course, we respect the priests and very affectionate, and we need priests for Eucharist. But no, actually, leave us as we are. We're doing fine. So I think once the nettle is grasped and people come forward, it's amazing what can happen. And it won't always, as Pauline just said, it won't always be smooth. It's an undulating road, and it's one which has conflict built into it. And the Pope is again and again saying, don't avoid conflict, caress it, endure it. And so there's a special, if you like, awareness that that's so, and that this method of conversation in the spirit is one very helpful way of facing that. I think Bishop Ray Brown has done extremely well to focus on mission as the primary objective, if you like, and not to focus so much on the falling number of priests. And I would say that the Pope has the two things going together, mission on the one hand and encounter with Jesus Christ on the other. In other words, our faith. So we're moving to a position in Ireland where faith is no longer cultural, it's intentional. It's something that we choose. That's the change cultural context. And that whole encounter with Jesus Christ and our ability to talk about our faith and our doubts is very important in an age which values transparency and which a culture which cherishes storytelling and experience. So us oldies haven't been used to that. We've been used to talking in apologetics and metaphysics and first principles. And there's a change of key there that's very important. And that the more we are able to do it, the more attractive our church will become to younger people. And so the mission must be welcoming, it must be inclusive, it must invite people in and not be asking for too many evidences of, for example, orthodoxy and so on. And just to say as well, I do think that while the focus at the moment, and rightly so in Kerry and in the two parishes, the two dioceses we heard about, is on governance and on pastoral practice, there is also an invitation in all of this to be involved in the formation and the reception of church teaching. And that does come into things, for example, like the ordination of married priests, the possibility of that. It's discipline rather than teaching, but certainly the ordination of women to diaconate and possibly to priesthood. So just to say, there is a very good presentation of the canon law mechanics of this last September in the Furrow by Eugene Duffy. And I talked with Eugene on the phone the other day, and he drew my attention to the fact that there are all kinds of solutions for the issues which you are facing in Kerry. Solutions like foreign priests coming in, solutions like permanent deacons, solutions like the regrouping of parishes. But noticeable among that, and we've had a bit of it in Elena's and Pauline's presentation, the freedom of the bishop to delegate and to designate lay people to be leaders. So you could call them coordinators. They're capable, as we've heard from Elena, to facilitate at funerals. They're capable of speaking at Mass. They're even capable with designation of doing marriages. And so there's a whole expansion of ministerial roles, which even the current canon law allows, which we don't often use, and which future canon law it's envisaged will certainly enlarge on. And just to say that then, the Pope himself, if you recall, on his visit during the Amazonian Synod, when he did the exhortation afterwards, Dear Amazon, he opened the possibility of bishops designating lay people as leaders in their local communities. And that had already been happening informally, and very many of these leaders were, of course, women. And so that was a specific ministry in the church, which I think we should throw into the pot, at least in terms of when we're thinking about exploring the future. So just to finish, I do want to say what you said at the beginning, that I don't think there is a blueprint here. I think what there is an invitation to tap into the Spirit as found in the experience of fellow Catholics, fellow Christians, as we travel along together, and to learn how to do communal discernment. So to learn the consolations and the desolations and the movement that goes on. And even then to allow ourselves to risk the fact that even when we're well briefed and when you've gone through this process and certain decisions are taken, that a part of discernment is how that's received. So it's confirmation, and not to be afraid to say, okay, we thought we'd made a good decision there, but in 2 years' time, we see that needs reshaping or it needs revisiting. So it's an ongoing journey, and it doesn't admit of simple answers. And to me, as I said at the start, it's exciting. I think it's a wonderful way to be church, because so many people, so many lay people have such enormous gifts and talents, which, if you like, the prevalence of so many clergy has only resulted in them being quiet and submissive and infantilized. And it's lovely to see something different happening, which Vatican II envisaged, which didn't happen post-Vatican II, but which is now happening. Thanks be to God.
Okay, great. And I suppose what I'm hearing there, Jerry, and we'll go now back to the folk and hear their comments, but what I'm hearing is sense, certainly from working across dioceses in the country, that there's a lot of hope on the ground that the church can change to be more inclusive and more effective in its mission. And what I'm hearing you saying is that there is a movement, if you like, from the top, which is open to that. And that we might, to quote Heaney, arrive at a time when hope and history rhyme. Is that a fair enough summary of what you've said there?
No, I think it's a very fair summary. And if you recall, about 2 years ago, we had this consultation process, and people have been asking since, well, what's happened? And just to say, it will be relaunched, and there is commitments going to be announced by the bishops to a series of mini synods on all kinds of topics that are particular to Ireland, if you like. And so people will be invited, apart from what you're doing in Kerry, which is a model of the whole synodal process. But it's a bigger thing that Ireland is called to, and the Church Universal is called to. And I think we will be invited back into it. And I think, from my experience, the Episcopal Conference is very much open to that.
Thanks, Jerry. All right. So, Francis, you've been watching. What are the questions and the comments? And Lena, Pauline, and Jerry will be ready to pick up on whatever you've surfaced there. So, do you want to start?
I will indeed. So thanks to all three of you. And it has generated great energy and great lots of conversation in terms of our questions. So I'm going to start maybe with a really practical question, which is probably more to you, Elena and Pauline. People are very encouraged, loving to see two women talking and speaking about their ministry. Just wondering how you now manage sacraments in both of your dioceses, please.
Okay, Pauline, do you want to start there?
Yeah, I mean, we manage sacraments in a variety of ways across the diocese. I'll give you an example from witness, because that's my experience directly. We've worked together and brought our sacramental processes together as one parish. So we have many dotted about in the pastoral area, and we started working as teams. So we put together all the catechists that were across our 8 to 9 parishes and came together as one big team. And we started a family catechesis process, it was called, to deliver First Communion and reconciliation. And we had teams of about 60 of us, and I facilitated that as the coordinator. And we worked and went out across the whole town and enabled families to come to different groups. They happened across the week at different times, some at the weekend, some in the early evening, straight after school. And families came together in groups of up to 15 families, and they could be from any of the primary schools. We have 7 primary schools in the parish. And our team, we did formation for our team, brought us together. We went for away days. So all of those little teams I set up, and I used to facilitate and support the parents and be that link person. And all the teams, we'd give the resources to the teams, and they would each be delivering with 2 or 3 catechists up to 15 families for about 180 families across the town. And we did that right up to COVID. We do it differently now because that took a lot of time. It took a lot of energy, but it served a very good purpose at that point of us being St Wilfrid's, because it enabled families across the whole town who were across 7 primary schools, 7 Catholic primaries, to get a sense of the parish has changed, because they'd used to have the parish school and that things would happen in that parish with that school, and they were able to mix across the whole town to whatever time session suited them, and they'd sign up to a session and the parents would come and sit and the catechist would introduce the session and the parents would facilitate that with the child. So that was a very different initiative, and it served us very well at that time because it got the message to families who didn't necessarily come regularly to church, but it gave them a different vision of how the parish had changed.
Okay, thanks,
So
Polly.
that's
And yeah, Alina, how do you manage the sacraments in your setup?
So for us, the preparation is usually done by a pastoral worker together, teamed up with the religion teachers, for example, and the priests are usually only coming for the actual mass, only for the actual sacrament then. So all of the preparation beforehand runs through the hands of pastoral workers, or also voluntary volunteers, which works quite well. And for baptisms, we have now started doing group baptisms. We had for a very long time, mainly individual ones. Of course, that died down a bit during Corona because we had to do individual ones again. But it's now starting again that several families get together. They get together some evenings to get prepared. What is baptism about? That's also often done by a lay pastoral worker, and then the actual celebration is, of course, with the priest. We do have, however, already a diocese in Austria, the Diocese of Linz. It's more in the eastern part, and they already ran into the problem that they don't have enough priests for the baptisms, so they already have some sort of special allowance for the lay pastoral workers to do baptisms, women as well as men. We don't have that in my diocese, so I can't tell you too many details, but that's already something that's been explored in Austria already.
Okay. All right, that's fascinating. So we'll keep going. Francis, is there another question there, another comment that you want to raise?
There is indeed. So the question I'm coming to you with now is in terms of funerals. I suppose people, I think, are asking a broader question maybe than the detail. It's how is this received? What sort of a format you use? I suppose how you've explored this as lay people exercising these ministries rather than the clergyman coming in. There's some sense around that. So maybe not the minute detail, but the flow of it, if that would be okay.
All right. And Alina, I know you spoke to that, like you were working in a rural traditional area, and how people have reacted to funerals without priests.
Yeah, so we have a little booklet that's a little guideline for our diocese for people who do funerals who are not priests. It's currently rewritten to adjust a bit to the current times. But it's usually either a meeting in the church and doing liturgy of the word, or directly at the cemetery, and it is quite a quite emotional experience also for me, I have to say. I guess also for the priests who do funerals, because usually it goes like this: a person dies, and then the family, they get in touch with the mortician and also with the secretary of their own parish, and then the secretary calls, usually if there is a residential priest, the priest, and also talks to the family. Would they really want to have a mass? Is that something that's very important to them? Or would they also be fine with celebrating a liturgy of the word, some readings from the scripture? And then depending on that, they would try to find a priest, maybe that from another parish, to come in and do the mass. Or if they say, no, we know Elena, for example, she's our pastoral worker, we're completely fine with that, then I would do the talk to the family, I would do all of the preparation, do the whole the whole thing by myself. Yeah, and then that's how it goes, and it is going very well, especially with people with whom I've been in touch a lot, like maybe already some families from the first communion preparation or something like this, and then they know your face, they know you, so often they feel more, yeah, it's nicer for them to do it with me rather than a priest that lives I don't know how many kilometers away. So it works quite well. To be honest, I'm pretty surprised because I was a bit skeptical at first how it would be with me as a woman there. But people reacted very, very positively, I have to say.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you.
How was it for you in Liverpool, Pauline, with the funeral?
With funerals in witness, we haven't gone down the path of lay-led funerals because our team of priests have led the majority of them, and deacons from other deaneries have come in and led. We've now got a deacon in our deanery, in our parish. So, but in Liverpool, in the diocese, there are, like Elena has said, there are people who've done training sessions. So it could be something that in the next round of changes, which we're about to have in 2024, we're going to shift to having 2 priests instead of 4 by this summer. That could be something that we'll explore then.
Okay, thanks, Pauline. Good. Francis, is another question or observation?
Yeah. So Jerry, if I might come to you, Father Jerry, great delight that you are so excited about the future. You've given people great hope and a great lift in their spirit. You might say a little bit more about, I suppose, the coming to birth of the Second Vatican Council now, like all that we had hoped for the last 50 years, and we're seeing remnants of it now. Can you say a little bit more to people about that in kind of really concrete ways? People were excited by that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think people were excited. Those of us old enough to remember, we were excited when the Second Vatican Council was finished. And it was a great disappointment then. And people have wondered what happened. And I suppose there's always the fear, could this happen again? People say, Pope Francis is an old man, and if he retires or when he dies, is this going to continue? But I think what happened after Vatican II was interesting, that while the ideas were there, the theology was there, there wasn't somehow the ordinary slog work that you're doing now in the diocese by convening all these meetings and having committees, and it can be tedious, as the Pope says. Pope Francis says this: how do you translate the beautiful rhetoric of synodality into reality? And it can be wearisome and tedious because you have to give time to it. Now, it can be very exciting and joyful as well. And we had that wonderful meeting in Athlone. It was almost 2 summers ago, which was just so, it was like Pentecost redone. So I think what's happened with regard to Vatican II is, whereas Vatican II focused on the Pope's relationship with the bishops and tried to talk about collegiality, and separately then there was talk about what baptism meant for lay people, what Pope Francis has done has gone more radical. He has said collegiality is fine, Pope and bishops, but what we need is Pope, bishops, priests, and people. So it's all the baptized and how they share in what it is to be church. It's the people of God. That's the exciting bit for me, that we're really tapping into all the great talents and all the great abilities which people have. And then you begin to unearth, and people are surprised themselves. And it was lovely to hear Elena say, when she began the ministry of funerals, she herself was surprised that people accepted her so well. And I've often had the experience of lay people who discover they're able to talk about their relationship with Jesus Christ in a way that's very, very moving and very intelligent. And so this thing that Karl Rahner said back in the 50s and 60s in Germany, that the Christian of the future would have to be a mystic. So what he meant was that we couldn't anymore rely on the culture to support us. Exactly as Martin said at the start, that culture has changed unrecognizably. And now we have to if we're part of church, we have to do so by conviction. And the conviction will somehow always find its root in the relationship with Jesus Christ. And for us to begin to talk about that is enormously important. And I think when young people, because older people worry about the fact that young people aren't practicing, you can be sure if young people begin to become aware that those who are in the church are authentic about their faith, that the mission includes not simply getting people back to church, but deep care for the poor, for our attitude to immigrants, for war and peace, for care of the earth. If that's all part of what we see as the kingdom of God, and we live that out, the church becomes more attractive. And I can already see signs of it. You read, it's surprising signs of it. The novels of Sally Rooney may be a surprising source for most people. The great COVID thing for normal people and so on. If you read her latest novel, Beautiful World, Where Are You? You find people in their 30s exploring what it means to have belief. These are young people who have good jobs, who are radically political, who have as much sex as they want, and suddenly they're asking, is that all there is? And what more might there be? And so the characters are discussing Thomas Aquinas, they're discussing Jesus, they're discussing the Mass in a way that's very unusual in Irish culture at the moment, but could be a harbinger of things to come if we have the stamina and the commitment and the joy to continue walking along this route.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Frances, do you want to keep going?
I have more questions. And actually, one of the comments made was that whole thing of being able to speak about our faith in Jesus and that people are really seeking Jesus and what difference that can make in people's lives. Maybe two questions back to the women again, which are around the role of the layperson and the role of the deacon, and if there are deacons in your diocese. And then also, how have the clergy who were in the diocese prior to these changes, how have they embraced these changes? So over to the two of you. Thank you.
Okay, Pauline, do you want to kick in there? Maybe that last question, because in lots of ways, Liverpool is a very Irish church. So
Yeah.
you're not a million miles away from where the rest of us are at. So how have the priests responded to what has happened over the last 20 years?
I would say, in all honesty, that has been a big challenge for the priests. That doesn't mean to say that they've not all been open to it, but I would say it's probably been more of a challenge to priests than it has to laity. And it's all tied up with the expectation of that we place on priests and that they carry. And I've worked over the past 20 odd years in many different sort of coordinating groups. I've chaired groups that have been priests, and they've been the priests and lay people working together, and they've been the decision-making body in the parish. And as the chair of that, for new priests sometimes coming into the parish, that was very challenging. Because they're coming in and thinking, well, this is my role as a priest, not necessarily as a parish priest at the time, perhaps as an assistant, one of the assistant priests, and to be able to give themselves time to settle in, to see, well, how does this work? And where am I in this? I think is a big challenge. One of the people often ask the question, what have been the joys and what have been the challenges? And I would say one that I often quote as top of the list of the challenges is losing yourself for the common good and letting go. And that is also top of the joys, if you're able to do that. And I think that's harder as an ordained minister than it is as a layperson. So looking to the common good means that you have to sometimes lose yourself. And if your ministry, you've been ordained thinking this is my calling and this is what my mission is in that calling, and that is shifted when you get to that place, it's a hard one to receive and to ponder.
How is that with you, Elena? Is it the same or is it different?
I do say it is very difficult for the priests, maybe, but I think in general, in our current times, the identity of being a priest is something that changes maybe a bit to compared to how it was in the last century, maybe. So we also have a lot of younger priests that come out from their training from university, and they don't even want to become residential priests. They say from the start, I'm not the person to do all the planning when it comes to economy and these things. I want to be there for doing pastoral care, but I want to work in a team with other people and plan these things out. So that is a very new type of priest identity that we get currently. And but what I think is very important and what works a lot for us is that there needs to be trust between the leader of like the pastoral area, if there is a residential priest still, and also a lot of transparency. So for us, it is very important, or for me personally, it's very important to meet on a regular basis with my residential priest, and we just update each other what is going on in the parishes, what are currently maybe the problems, what is something that people think about currently. And it is really important for him to have me sometimes as his ears in the parishes, because when he sometimes has to run from one mass to the next, he cannot stay in the parish, but after mass I'm still there, so people approach me and talk to me about different things, and then around every 2 weeks we would sit together and just have a chat about what's going on, also what is on his mind. And I think transparency and trust are very, very important in these type of models that we have right now.
Okay. Frances, we're up against the hour. Just wondering, is there something else that you'd want to raise?
It's just maybe to speak to both the women again. Sorry about this, Father Jerry, but it's around your own roles. So there's a question around one of you is a volunteer and one of you is a paid pastoral worker. There's also around how you work alongside the deacons, if there are deacons in your pastoral area. And then have you been given a particular mandate? In other words, is there a clarity of roles as to what you do as opposed to what the deacon does, as opposed to what the clergy take on? There's a few questions in that regard, and just for clarity on that would be okay.
Yeah. Pauline, do you want to pick up on that? Like, you've been a volunteer all these decades. Like, have you a clear role, a mandate that's recognized and respected?
I have had many different ones, from being chair of coordinating groups and the lead person for the catechetical team when we were setting that big team up, and I'm a Eucharistic minister. I've got lots of different things, but I'm not alone in that. But I think there's a growing sense of, because I'm like a volunteer, I've not got an agenda that I've got to ensure that I present to the priest, because I'm fulfilling my baptismal vocation. So it's not as clear cut as having an agenda or a remit or a mandate or whatever, because and I think there's strength in this, because to have somebody who has got a specific job description. If I was a paid pastoral worker, I'd have a specific job description. There's clarity in that. As a very involved and experienced layperson fulfilling different roles, there's also a strength in having that mixture. And a deacon. Now we've got a deacon who's only come in the last few months. But it's lovely to see how there's a weaving together there, and there are different elements that we all bring, because for a priest to have a pastoral associate, that's like a working relationship, and there's got to be that sort of clarity of roles. I don't bring the same, I'll put in inverted commas, threat to a priest as perhaps a paid pastoral worker might, if they are looking at the nature of their pastoral work. But I'm not answerable as a worker would be to the priest in that way. So we work. It's a stronger synodal model when you've got a mixture of paid people, deacons, priests, and lay people as volunteers. I think there's a great strength in that, because as a volunteer, you can bring another dimension. But I think you've got to be brave enough and courageous enough to step up to that plate and know that you also have a place.
Good.
That's
Good.
it. Yeah. That's the key thing. And we all have that place.
But what about you, Alina? In your circumstance now, is your role recognised and respected among other church players, including among the clergy?
I would say so. For us, we get sent by the bishop in an official mass. So we have like this official vocation, if you want to call it. And we do have a specific agenda. It depends on the pastoral unit that you work in, of course, what is needed. But it is very clear what our tasks are. But it can, of course, develop over time. If we see, there should be more focus on that, for example, then the tasks can, of course, change. And in my setting, we also have a deacon, already a bit older, but there it was always so very nice working together, or it is always very nice working together. And also, it is a very warm relationship, I would say, between the voluntary workers and me as a lay pastoral worker, and also our deacon and the priest. It is very nice to also be able to just, for the priests, I think, to be able to just have a chat sometimes with someone that is employed also by the diocese, so somehow in the same boat, but still also not completely. So we every now and then we would even get together, and we had a priest from Africa for a while with us, and he was asking me for feedback on his sermon, because he wasn't so strong in German yet. So it was also really nice to just be able to sit together and share and realize that your the things you can give is also very valued by them. It's a very nice giving and taking between everyone, and it's really nice to just be very creative in how we form our parishes all together with the voluntary workers, of course. So it's a very warm togetherness, I would say.
Good. You're smiling there, Jerry. Are you seeing something about the future here? Or what are you seeing?
No, I'm delighted to hear these experiences. No, just that our synodal group commissioned a piece of professional research done by somebody in Belfast on the Irish Church. And the group which was finding the change, and particularly synodality, most difficult were priests. So when Pauline said that she used the word challenging, that the priests found it challenging, I think that's echoed in Ireland. And it was particularly from the point of view of how to exercise leadership. So their own formation and training had led them to lead from the top, if you like, to have a very clear idea of where they were going. And if they consulted, it was with a view to winning people over to their point of view. So the idea of sitting down with a blank check or a tabula rasa with people and together trying to imagine the future is something that many priests find difficult. And of course, the cohort is aging. They've taken a lot of knocks of one sort or another. Very often, priests are greatly loved by their parishioners, but the general reputation, if you like, of priests has been badly hit by the clerical abuse scandal. So that's what the research has found. And then you get examples which are very different and which are more in line with what Pauline and Elena have talked about. And I think of one guy in Carlo, I won't mention his name, but he's the sole priest in a parish. He has 2 female paid assistants, and he sees himself very much as working in a team with them. They sit down about everything. They talk about where the parish is going and what's happening and so on. And that works extremely well. But I've heard umpteen stories as well of parishes which have had good parish councils. The parish priest, for one reason or another, is changed or retired. A new man comes in, he's a different view of church, and he disbands the parish council. So that's not a happy thing. And it probably comes from some kind of fear. And it's interesting that the synod in Rome, one of the recommendations from the first session was that councils like diocesan and parish councils become mandatory in canon law. So that was an interesting kind of suggestion coming out of that experience, I'd say, of resistance among us priests.
Okay. Francis, we had to stop sometime, will we?
I think so. Maybe there's a final question, and it's maybe for anybody, maybe just a very quick comment. We've had 2 very different presentations in terms of one, an urban area, a number of parishes which have amalgamated. We have a rural area with you, Elena, which is more maybe akin to our own diocese here as a rural diocese, where you've kept the identity of all of your small parishes, but with a shared ministry. From hearing one another, any final comments or pointers as to why those decisions were made, do you think? And Martin, maybe you know the answer to this, or Jerry.
No. Pauline, you go ahead first there. Is there anything, any last word you want to offer us?
I think I echo what was said earlier by Jerry, that the key is there is no blueprint. And we're aware that what we've done in witness and what we've achieved in this experience won't fit every pastoral area, every deanery in the Liverpool diocese. So we look and say, what have we learned from this? What are the key insights? And how can we use them, that learning and that key insight from this experience, and apply it to any given local circumstance? I think that's the key. That don't search and think, oh, does that mean we've all got to do that? Does that mean we've all got to do this? We will, because the Holy Spirit will be with us, find a way, and it will work.
Thanks, Pauline. And Elena, have you a last word you want to leave us with?
Well, that would have been already such a nice last word with the Holy Spirit. I just want to say it is such a nice format here to share experiences, because after all, we're all in the same church. Even though I'm in Austria and you're in Ireland or England, we are still part all of the Catholic Church. And it is so interesting to see what other people try, what are their experiences, and just get together and share. And I think that is something that we should do maybe more often and lay more focus on, because a lot of problems are similar and we're faced with a lot of similar situations. So it is lovely to see what you all do in the different dioceses. I'm really looking forward to also follow what will come out of all these efforts in the Diocese of Kerry. I'm really interested now. And yeah, I just find this so nice, because in this type of get together in this webinar, you just also see this spirit of togetherness, being together in one Catholic Church, no matter where we are, all around the globe, actually.
Thanks, Elena. And Jerry, have you a last word for us?
Oh, just to say how encouraging I find gatherings like this. I think it's wonderful. And just to repeat that thing that I think we are learning by doing, we're learning through experience. And the Pope is great at saying, don't be afraid to make a mess, make mistakes, and we will make mistakes and we will make a mess. But that whole thing that comes right through the scriptures, do not be afraid. And we have the Holy Spirit with us. And I think it's a time of great hope for our church. So I'm just very happy to be with you, and I wish every blessing on your plans in Kerry in the future. And like Elena, I look forward to hearing what comes out. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Francis, will you wrap up?
Well, just to say thank you very much. I really appreciate our speakers coming online. I really appreciate people at home engaging with the process. Martin, for keeping us on the task and keeping us focused, and really, I suppose, linking us back to why we're doing this. We're doing this because we as a diocese are seeking to really hear what's the Spirit saying to us at the moment. What are we saying to one another? What do we need to do as we move forward? And I suppose all of us get an opportunity to put our voice more succinctly, perhaps, in our own local parishes, as over the next couple of weeks, there will be a local gathering in your parish, exploring what does the future of our parish look like for us here in the Diocese of Kerry. So we're not just in the county of Kerry, we're also in Cork. So all our Cork brethren will be also having this conversation. So you might keep an eye to your own parish newsletter, to Horizons, to our diocesan website, where you'll find details of your own local meeting. And really, it's an important time for us that we come, we hear and listen, we speak the truth as we hear it, we listen to one another, and as Jerry, you said at the beginning, maybe listen to things and listen to people we might not always find it easy to hear, and that together we'll trust that the Spirit will lead us. So with thanks to our speakers, Pauline, Elena and Jerry, with thanks to you, Martin, for keeping the process and keeping us engaged, and thanks to all of you at home. Verboas Benacht, and until we meet again, Slán agus Guramagat.